Hi, welcome to another endorsement interview with the Times Editorial Board. With us today are three candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives. On your far left will be Mark Leyva, the Republican candidate. In the center we have the incumbent, Pete Visclosky, a Democrat, and Libertarian candidate to your far right, Donna Dunn. Welcome. I'm Doug Ross, editorial page editor at the Times. With us are publisher Chris White and editor Bob Heiss. Well, we should probably start by talking about, what your particular qualifications are. Donna.
Well, I'm born and raised in Northwest Indiana. I currently reside in Hessville. I've lived here my whole life, minus the 8 years I served in the United States Marine Corps. And I've lived, like I said, I've lived here my whole life. I feel that I'm qualified for this job because I am one of the people here. I've lived the life that the people of this region live. I support the people of this region. I've been, I've had to make those tough choices. I've had to decide, how am I going to pay my mortgage this month? I've had to add some sort of varieties. From one day we're going to have, well, what are we going to have for dinner? How are we going to provide dinner? I have a union job, like so many in the region here, and I feel that being from the region, living the life that the region and that the people of this region live, qualifies me, more than qualifies me to represent them.
Okay, Pete.
Doug, I currently serve Northwest Indiana in the United States Congress. It's comprised of 710,000 constituents, and do believe the responsibility of the office is to grow the economy in Northwest Indiana. Fight very hard as Vice Chair of the Executive Committee of the Steel Caucus on behalf of the domestic steel industry, also manufacturing in general, as well as trying to grow our economy. Some of the projects we've worked on is the dredging of the Indian Harbor Ship Canal for the first time since 1972, the cleanup of the Grand Calumet River, as well as the development of things like the Gary Airport, recapturing our lakeshore, and expanding the South Shore system, again, to grow the economy in Northwest Indiana.
Okay, Mark?
Well, Doug, constitutionally, qualifications under Article 1, Section 2, being a U.S. citizen over the age of 25 clearly qualifies me under the Constitution. But in most layman terms, I'm a former steel worker, Local 1010, union carpenter, Illinois Local 434. Again, a person from the community. My father came here in 1924 from Mexico, and I'm first generation American Mexican, that strong-rooted, lifelong Lake County resident. And I believe that I have a lot to offer as far as limited government, fiscal responsibility, and the free markets that will grow and maintain our economy, because the abuse of the Constitution in Washington and by Congress is halting the stimulus of our economy, and we need to do better.
Okay, well, that's my next question, is how do you stimulate the economy, and in particular in the 1st District? Pete, let's start with you this time.
Mentioned the development of the South Shore. The problem we have in Northwest Indiana is, while we have a strong manufacturing base, we're very proud of the fact that we produce more steel in 2 counties than any state in the country. We need to grow alternative jobs. On the Illinois side of the line, we have over 400 miles of rail line. On the Indiana side, 38 as far as our mass transportation system. I am convinced that we need to make an investment in the future for our children to grow our economy, to tie ourselves to an economy, Chicago's, that is larger than Sweden's, and thereby capitalize on our other resources. So we're on the largest body of fresh water on the planet Earth. We've got every east-west major freight line in this country, as well as 4 interstates in Northwest Indiana. We have lost population, we've gotten older, we've seen our median income decline because we have failed to invest. So do believe that we need to expand the South Shore to Valparaiso and to Lowell. We need to continue to do what the communities of Portage and Whiting have done by opening up our lakeshore and continuing to aggressively defend basic manufacturing and steel in Washington, D.C.
Okay, Mark?
Well, I'm a firm believer of stimulating and creating business, pro-growth government, and that means being business friendly. And I believe that capitalism and expansion of any good jobs come from the private sector, not the government, okay? Well, the bigger government gets, the smaller paychecks individuals have. And the smaller paychecks that they have, the smaller amounts of means to spend in their local economy creates a more burden on service-based businesses, like the restaurant industry or any business in general that people purchase. So when federal government's already bloated and too big, and remember, it used to be states' rights and small federal government, it's flip-flop, and our forefathers are turning over in their graves. And on top of a big bloated federal government that we have right now, we have a county government with a new county income tax of 1.5%. That is taking more money out of the paychecks of the hard-working individuals and less money to spend in their local economy. So to address how it, I believe that at the federal level, and we're talking U.S. House of Representatives here, not Lake County government. So, and my means is my personal quote is, politics benefits the few, good government benefits all. So if you started at the federal level, if we repealed Obamacare to help the businessmen expand and know how their 5- and 10-year plans of business would be going, that would be one start. Eliminating or cutting the corporate tax in half would be another way to stimulate the economy from the top down. Because remember, it's not the corporations that are paying the taxes. It's the individuals that are buying the products and goods and services that are paying the taxes. So we need that type. And we need to cut back on government regulations so that all businesses have a better opportunity to be created and expand. And one other one would be energy independence. Indiana is a coal and Illinois is a coal state. Why aren't we creating these great jobs here or duplicating the same types of expansion of jobs like North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania? North Dakota has almost 0 to 3% unemployment, don't have enough space for jobs. We need to duplicate success of the business and creative job industry, and that means small government, and that's how I would do it.
Well, you opened the ball on the tax debate. Donna, what do you think?
Taxes, taxes are too high. I'm sure that most Americans would agree with me. One of the things that we have is one, we have a bloated federal government, and I agree with Mr. Leyva and Mr. Visclosky on that part. Our government spends more money than it takes in, and when I do my home budget, I know if I spent more money than I took in, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I'd probably be in prison somewhere. One of the things, our great economic power comes from the fact that Americans determine our own economic destiny, and I think we need to allow Americans to get back to determining their own economic destiny, and by cutting government regulations. And you know, everybody, in a recent interview, Nancy Pelosi stated that there's no more money to cut from the budget. Well, I respectfully disagree with Ms. Pelosi. The government spent $270 million on the CJ, or the C-27J aircraft. That's an aircraft that the United States Air Force went to Congress, told Congress they did not need it, that the C-130 filled that need, and they did not need it. The government built it anyway. And 5 of those planes came right off the assembly line and went right into storage. The government also spent $3.5 million to save $2 million over the course of 25 years. Now, only in a government does that accounting make sense. And that was spent to put solar panels, excuse me, excuse me, that was spent to put solar panels at the Manchester-Boston airport. The problem with those solar panels is that the sun reflects off of them, blinding the air traffic controllers for part of the day, so that they have to be covered with tarps. So there's $2.5 million that was wasted. Another waste is the State Department spent $630,000 to get more likes to their Facebook page. That money is a waste. The government spends $1.5 billion, and I mean billion with a B, maintaining buildings that they no longer need or use. The Department of Agriculture spent $415,000 to promote California wine in China. While I'm all for businesses supporting businesses and businesses reaching out and selling their product wherever they can, it's not the role of the federal government to promote businesses in foreign countries. If those wineries in California want to promote their business in another country, or any country for that matter, they should be doing that themselves. That's not the role of the federal government. I'm a firm believer that any time the federal budget is not balanced, that congressional salaries should be frozen. And if I'm elected, I would vote for that in a second. During our government shutdown, our most recent government shutdown, we had federal employees. There was 10,000 federal employees making over $100,000 a year. Those employees were furloughed as non-essential. My argument is, if those employees are non-essential, why are they even employees? On top of that, those employees were also paid $4,000 while they were off during the government shutdown. These are just some of the ways that the federal government is wasting our tax money. We as Americans, we as residents of Northwest Indiana, we send our hard-earned dollars to Washington, and a big chunk of our hard-earned dollars. Every year on April 15th when we fill out our taxes, it's disheartening to see I pay more money in federal taxes than my mom gets back in Social Security. I could take that money that the government takes from me and much better take care of my mother than Social Security ever could. But we send our hard-earned money to Washington, D.C., and then Washington, in their big overgrown entity that they determine how that money gets given back to us. And I argue that we as Americans, we are the residents of Northwest Indiana, are more than smart enough to figure out what to do with our own money, and give that back to the people, and let us figure out what we want to do with it.
Okay, Pete?
I would agree that we should be careful about every penny that we spend, and I would also add two examples of efforts on my behalf. I am the ranking Democrat on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. We have jurisdiction over a significant amount of money. When my chairman, Mr. Frelinghuysen from New Jersey, and I took our bill to the floor, we essentially agreed with the Department of Defense to cut an A-10 aircraft program. An incredible aircraft, has been very useful for the last generation as far as our military forces, but at this point going to be replaced. I wouldn't want to attach a specific dollar figure, but essentially it would cost and will cost us about $400 million to maintain it for the coming year, even though the Department of Defense does not want it. The chairman and I agreed. We took those monies out of the bill. Unfortunately, when that bill was on the House floor and in consideration in the United States Senate, those monies were put back in. Congress generically has to do a better job. I would want the constituents of the 1st District to know I'm doing my best. We have a system where the departments have an opportunity to reprogram money if they believe there is a better use for it or a different use for it. It has to be approved by our committee. Last week, literally, the chairman and I turned down a request to spend $1.2 billion to build an additional 5 F-35 aircraft. That's part of the fundamental defense budget and should not have been an add-on. We voted to take that out. So I do think we have to pay that type of attention. I would put this debate into context, however. Those examples are part of what we call discretionary spending. That is the Department of Education, Defense, Energy. 27% of federal spending is now discretionary. All others is interest on the debt, retirement programs, and a few miscellaneous programs. So at this point in time, to suggest that all government spending is a waste, the majority of government spending today is on federal retirement programs, and I don't think anyone would characterize that as a waste of money. We have to address that problem as well and would want to put it into context. But the final thing I would say is we ought to also look at how we can maximize the expenditure of our tax dollars. I referenced the expansion of the South Shore Service. Mr. Leyva mentioned the county income tax. That tax exists. Federal taxes exist to build mass transit systems. We have encouraged local communities to take just a small fraction of an existing tax, not a new tax, and let us leverage that with assistance from the state, from the Regional Development Authority, and then dollar for dollar match it with a return, again, of federal taxes we pay. So part of this is to maximize the benefit of the taxes that are still being paid. So I think we have to keep all of those issues in the context as well.
We should probably talk about the defense budget. You know, it's huge. As I understand, the United States spends more for defense than most other developed countries combined. We have some unique threats that are coming up. We've got China emerging as a superpower, and we've got terrorism popping up in the Middle East, but also elsewhere. So how do you see the role of Congress in shaping the defense budget to meet those needs? Pete, why don't you begin?
I'll start to put it into context again. Last year's budget was about $572 billion. This year's budget will be slightly under that because we continue to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. Obviously, troops are now being introduced again in Iraq. There is increased military activity in the Middle East. I must tell you that I voted against the authorization for the assistance that the President requested several weeks ago in Syria and Iraq. For one reason, no one was talking about how much this is going to cost. And it was attached to a temporary measure whose authority lasts until December 8th, and there is a cost that needs to be attached. And I do think it's appropriate for the Congress to ask for a more detailed plan with some specifics as to the long-term cost, because I do credit the President for being very honest in suggesting that this situation is going to probably last beyond his presidency. I give him credit for being honest about that. We need a plan as far as the fiscal implications of this for the taxpayers that lasts more than 90 days. So at this point, our request is we'd like to see more specificity on the financial side as to what's going to happen in the future.
Okay, Mark?
Yes, I want to say that, number one, everything Washington and Congress has been doing to cut the military budget is, to me, appalling. Is there waste in the military budgets? Yes. But first of all, constitutionally, that is one of the things that Congress, our national security and the military, that we should be spending money on. Because I believe strength through peace. Okay? I also know that when we've been making all these cuts in the budgets over these last years, we shrank our military. We're laying off people, men and women in the military, but we are not cutting our fiscal budgets overall. We're wasting that money we were saving and we're putting it in social programs and general spending. It's not like we are cutting and saving our deficit spending. If we were cutting the military budgets and saving that money in deficit spending, I would say that that's a partial good idea. But what we're doing is we're cutting our budgets. We're putting our country at more security risks at a national level, especially not only our borders, But with ISIS and all these radical Muslim groups that are popping up, we're going to be putting our United States at risk at some point if we don't start really using our military for what it's used for, not, nation building. We need to go back the same way we won World War I and World War II. And also, we need a stronger Congress that's going to tell the president, you're not going to do nothing till you declare war constitutionally. Those are the things we need. But yes, there are wastes in all budgets, and I think that we should have somebody there that is being a watchdog to say where the waste is. But most of all, I think our national security for our nation and our children is number one. And what's going on today and allowing our borders to be open and to have terrorists come in and diseases come into this country that are putting our children and our grandchildren at risk, I think it's terrible that Congress is not putting a stronger hand down to get things accomplished, to make it safer for our nation.
Okay, Donna?
Well, I agree with what Mr. Leyva said about we need to follow the Constitution when it comes to foreign conflicts. We need, if we're going to go and send our young men and women to die in a foreign country, we need to declare war on that country. I firmly agree with that. But unlike Mr. Visclosky and Mr. Leyva, I've had to live these decisions as a United States Marine. I have had to work with Marines who have served in combat. I personally have never served in combat. I am thankful for that. Marines don't want to go to war. We train so we don't have to go to war. But that being said, when we are called, well, boy, we do go. And I think we are doing our young men and women a grave disservice. As Pete said, we have to determine what these conflicts are going to cost. And one of the things that we're not figuring into these conflicts is the treatment of our veterans when they come home. We have so many veterans who come home with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, missing body parts. And what do? We slam the door in their face. There are veterans who have to wait a year for a doctor's appointment. Imagine if you had to wait a year to go see your doctor. Imagine if you go to see your doctor, and I know of a man who served in the Army faithfully in Iraq and got shrapnel in his face. This young man was denied care because some clerk somewhere forgot to put in his service record book that he was in country. Where else but someplace like Iraq or Afghanistan can you get shrapnel in your face but there? But he was denied care. My solution is that we have what I would call a vet med card. This card would allow veterans to go see the doctor of their choice. This would allow them no longer to have to travel hundreds of miles to go see a doctor. They would no longer have to wait. We had the recent scandal out in Arizona. As a veteran, I'm not surprised by these stories that people are just now hearing about. I've been hearing about them for years, as many of our veterans have. They don't surprise me in the least. What surprises me is that they got attention, which I am grateful for. But the problem is that if these people are taking and cooking the books, if you will, to show that they are doing a better job than they are doing, and our veterans are dying, that is a national disgrace. And we can no longer treat our young men and women this way. We don't respect them. We're telling them that, yes, we want you to go and die for our country, for our Constitution, but when you come home, we're going to kick you to the curb. And that is wrong. And great nations are judged on how they treat their veterans. And we are treating our veterans in a deplorable conditions. There's over 200,000 veterans that have been waiting a year or more for an answer to their claim. You know, and when we talk about these veterans coming home, you know, like I said, they have traumatic brain injuries. They are missing body parts. And this is not something that goes away when they come home. This is something they have to live with for the rest of their life. And look how long it took the federal government to recognize Agent Orange. Look how long it took the federal government to recognize the Gulf War disease. Just recently, I got a letter in the mail from the VA about contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. So now I have to go to my doctor, get all this documentation. I may have health, I don't know if I do yet, but I may have some issues from that. And it took, and I haven't been at Camp Pendleton since the 80s, or I'm sorry, Camp Lejeune since the 80s. It took that long for them to admit something that had been going on for years. And again, that is wrong. And when we are, going to these foreign countries, for example, for ISIS, my opinion is there's 200 million people that are bordering countries where ISIS is a threat. Let them fight their war. It's not our war to fight. They're facing the threat. Let them fight. There are CIA-trained rebels that resulted in a direct pipeline of weapons from what they call vetted moderates. These weapons were sent to Al-Qaeda, which went to the al-Nusra sect, and from there it went to ISIS. So we are, in effect, arming the people that we're supposed to be fighting. That doesn't make sense to me. Another thing, just in July of this year, there was a full brigade of over 1,000 U.S.-backed rebels that joined ISIS. So how are we making this any better? We're not making it any better. We are in over 100 countries nationwide. And like Mr. Leyva said, I also believe in peace through power. And, I grew up in the military during the Reagan years. Reagan gave us our first pay raise that we had in years. He did a lot for the military, and I think one of his biggest accomplishments was Star Wars. Star Wars, he didn't have to fire a bullet. Yes, he spent a lot of money, but nobody died. Nobody got hurt. And I think we need to look at more strategies where we have power, but we also have peace. Because I think one of the silliest things we do is give a Marine a weapon and tell him, you're a peacekeeper. Peacekeepers don't carry weapons.
We should look at health care, and not just health care for veterans, but health care for all Americans. There are various programs to do that, a number of federal programs, actually. So you began the discussion, Pete. I'll let you take it out.
As far as health care, we obviously have had comprehensive health care legislation passed, and I would be the first person to suggest that it can be improved. And one thing that the Congress, specifically in the House of Representatives, has to come to grips with is let us consider issues to improve the underlying act, as opposed to, during this particular Congress, under the existing minority, having tens of votes simply to repeal it. Nothing in this world, rarely, is a black and white issue. And what is never talked about are the benefits that have accrued. Today, there are more than 10 million Americans who now have health insurance who did not have access to it before. Maybe they're one of the children who are now covered until they're 26. They might be an adult or a child who was discriminated against because they happen to have an existing condition before. You think about hospitals not being reimbursed for people because they were indigent. Today, hospitals have in excess of about $5.7 billion a year of additional reimbursements because states, many of which, are now participating in expanded Medicaid programs. Additionally, I think that we also have to understand that for women during childbearing years, their average out-of-pocket expenses are 68% greater on average than it is for men. One of the things that we've tended to lose sight of is we ought to equalize the cost of health care to the extent we can. Every individual is different for both sexes in this country. Can we continue to make improvements as we move forward? Absolutely. But do believe that we have improved the lives of many Americans because now they have access to a very good health care system. For seniors, because we've also made the attempt to begin to close the so-called donut hole, we're going to make those prescription drugs a bit more affordable. And insurance companies are now going to have to expend at least 80% of the dollars we pay them for our health care, as opposed to executive salaries or administrative expenses, so those monies are going to go back into the system as well. So we have made improvements. Do we have to go further? We do. And if I could, just on an addendum on the veterans' health, you made several very, very good points, and one of which we're fighting today is there is an improvement about veterans being able to go, given distances, to private institutions to make sure they get health care. That's just a logical, rational thing to do. The limit now is 40 miles, and it has a particular effect on the first district. You think about institutions in Chicago, you look at a map and say, well, that's less than 40 miles. Except we have people volunteering early in the morning at 5 o'clock to pick a veteran up, pick a community, Gary, Hammond, East Chicago, St. John, to get them to the Crown Point Center, to get on a bus to go to Chicago, spend the day to get a test, treatment, come back to Crown Point, get picked up by a volunteer, go back. That's more than 40 miles. And it is unfair to our veterans. We have tried on multiple occasions to have that situation corrected. I had personal conversations with General Saseki when he was Secretary of VA, and we're going to continue to press as regulations are now developed for that legislation Congress did pass this year. You have to take that travel time into consideration. I think you're absolutely right as far as that access, and would help some of our institutions locally by giving them that particular reimbursement.
Okay, Mark?
Well, first of all, I have to be on record that as far as the Affordable Care Act should be repealed. The only people in Congress that voted for it were the Democrats, and I don't mean to make it a political issue, but I want to make sure that it's an informed issue to all the voters, all right? Second of all, this Affordable Care Act is not affordable. The premiums are extensively higher, 40, 60% higher and going up. It's a bad bill overall. That's transfer of wealth, bloated big government, and the people that it's supposed to help, it's hurting. The families that have to pay for health care, it's increased health care. They're purchasing health care mandated by the federal government, saying that they have to pay for medical programs that they will never, ever need in their entire life. So, you know, before healthcare, the government-run healthcare, we had lower cost. We had lower premiums. People couldn't afford it. But ever since we've had government-run healthcare, we've had tens of millions of people lose coverage through their healthcare insurance companies because of the mandated laws that this Affordable Care Act presents. There was a need for healthcare reform before the Affordable Care Act. I will not disagree with that. But we need some real reform, not bloated government mandated first unconstitutionally and rewritten by the Supreme Court to get it passed is another big flaw that maybe some forget. But remember the people that are on Social Security and Medicare. This program takes out over $716 billion out of Medicare to help fund Affordable Care Act, our government-run health care. And people continue to see the premiums escalate and their family budgets shrinking. Now, also, for the first time in history, the federal government is now going to be subsidizing with our tax dollars the healthcare insurance industry for their losses. In the free market, government doesn't pay for anything. In the free market, a business succeeds or it fails on its own good merits through the fair market industry, okay? Now, on the other hand, there has been multiple ways of real tax reform, not tax reform, but healthcare reform that we could have implemented. I mean, we could have done a cross-state line purchasing of healthcare. I mean, Governor Jindal's plan was change the tax codes and give all individuals the same standard deduction of health care. Okay, this would help self-employed persons. I mean, why should only businesses get that deduction? Okay, we should be creating state grant pools of billions of dollars over 10 years that would allow states to create exchanges and create flexible and more, available form of health care. That would be another one. This would then also, if you did it through the states, they could also guarantee people pre-existing conditions for, through the new state exchange. Also, we have to stop the restricting of federal funding for abortions. I mean, first of all, that has nothing, our federal dollars should not be spent on things like that. And allowing Americans to buy insurance, again, across their state lines, those are important. There's a multiple of individuals and groups that have a multiple of ways. Medical savings accounts is a tremendous plan, similar to the veterans program that was talked about. And the current system is terrible, and it's hurting businesses. It's hurting the economy, and all it's doing is transfer wealth, growing big government, and when something is bad, I think you need to get rid of it and start over and look at real health care reforms. I mean, first, the waste alone in Washington to build the website for this is what, over $2 billion, I believe? I mean, that was because of the federal government doing it, incompetence of the people they hired, and a waste of all our federal tax dollars that we work hard for and send to Washington. And there's a multiple of waste just in the beginning of this programs, and it's just getting worse. And it hasn't been even implemented at the biggest level yet. It's only the smallest level of implementation, and we have these severe problems. Because the president unconstitutionally delayed the implementation of this Affordable Care Act, and the lack of courage from Congress to enforce the Constitution of any bill that they passed to be enforced, and they're not doing their duty, because when the total implementation of Obamacare does kick in, people with the parachute health care plans are going to be paying income taxes on their health care plans, something that they already have for free through their businesses and the companies they work for. They will be paying taxes on that. And there's also, when it's completely implemented and these businesses start going to part-time work, there's a very good chance, and it was argued by the AFL-CIO president, I forget his name off the top of my head, but argued that the union jobs could go down to part-time work if this was fully implemented. It's a very serious problem that I don't think we're putting all the negatives on the table. We need to address it, because it is going to hurt this economy even worse, and the businesses and the jobs, because we've already seen multiple service-based jobs already go to part-time work just from the signing and implementation of this bill. It's hurt the economy, hurt the working people, and most of all, it's hurt families and their budgets because of the high increased cost through this Affordable Care Act that is not affordable.
Chris, do you have any questions?
I'd like to know, one of the big bills increasing is Social Security, and what kind of reforms should be put into this system as more Americans are going to be getting it in the coming years. Mark, how about you? Want to start with some kind of, should there be Social Security reform, and what kinds should take place?
First of all, I think you have to be totally honest with the American people. and Congress has been lying to the American people for a multiple of years that it's been safe. It's not safe, because our budgets keep going bigger. They have been taking money from borrowing money from the Social Security Trust Fund that we don't like to talk about, and put in the general fund. As far as I'm concerned, the only solution is to be a two-part solution, and that would be anybody over to age 55 and above would stay on a government Social Security plan, and anybody below 55 years of age, I believe, should either have some type of savings account to opt out of Social Security, and most of all, we need to make sure that Congress does not touch the monies of the Social Security. Senator Daniel Moynihan was the smartest individual on this subject. Matter of fact, I think it was in the early 80s when they wanted to raise the Social Security taxes. You know, he said, look, first of all, we can raise it, but we have to stop spending the money. And then after they raised it, they had all kinds of money come in, but they didn't lock it up. They kept spending it. Congress kept spending and borrowing the money out of the Social Security Trust Fund. So first of all, I forget what the CBO shows that we're going to run out of money in the trust fund in the next 13, 15 years. I believe the Congressional Budget Office has somewhere in that estimate. And I think that we truly have to be more honest and talk about the facts. And we do need an alternative. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just going to leave it at that. We just need honesty from Congress. We need honesty for most people to know more about what the Congressional Budget Office tells Congress that is not telling the American people. And we need to stop borrowing money out of Social Security Trust Fund.
Well, when it comes to Social Security, I would want to put this to the people. You know, name me one government program that the government does well, that the government is successful at. I can't think of one. Most people I've talked to cannot think of one. Social Security is one of those issues that, you know, if you were to come out and say I want to do away with Social Security, you would be crucified, and probably and rightfully so. But that being said, I agree with Mr. Leyva. We have taken that money out of Social Security and put it into the general fund, which is not what that money was for. We need to privatize it. There are so many young people now who are saying, why, this is my money, I want to keep it. I should be able to do with my money what I see fit. And this is another government program, another unconstitutional government program that they have taken and said, give us your money, we know how to spend it better than you do. Then that's just idiotic. The American people are smart enough to know what to do with their own money. They can put it into a 401k. They can invest it as they see fit. I would argue that sometimes it's better to put it in your mattress than it is to put it in Social Security. As a railroad employee, I'm thankful I don't have to worry about Social Security because I have railroad retirement. That's me. That is not the majority of the people in Northwest Indiana or the majority of Americans. Because I know when I get ready to retire, Social Security is not going to be there for me, not going to be there for most of us. And for us to just sit around and do nothing and just throw more money at the problem, which is the government's solution, whenever there's a problem like this, let's just throw more money at it. Let's just get more money. Let's raise your taxes. Let's raise the age to where you can retire. That's not the answer. And now, you know, there's only approximately 2 people paying into Social Security for everybody that's getting ready to retire. Social Security was supposed to be for retirement. Now we have people getting Social Security for disabilities, for all other kind of issues that it was never designed for, and that is also a drain on the system. The fraud in the system. I would advocate for more inspectors to investigate the fraud. There are people collecting benefits from Social Security who could be working. And as hardworking Americans look at these people and say, hey, how come this person over here is getting Social Security, and I see him up on his roof with a bag of roofing shingles, and here I am going to work every day. And I think that is wrong. But I think we need to take it out of the hands of government and put it back into the hands of the American people, who are more than smart enough to know what to do with their own money.
I fundamentally disagree with my colleagues. To suggest that Social Security is not a well-run program and has not been successful and has not been a security blanket financially for senior citizens in this country since the 1930s is categorically incorrect. What is also incorrect is to suggest that anyone, Democrat, Republican, Congress, President, has taken a penny out of Social Security. There was one instance during the administration of President Reagan when there was going to be a shutdown of the government, where Secretary of Treasury Baker took money from the trust fund for the temporary operation of the government. Congress immediately passed legislation to have those monies repaid to the trust fund with the accrued interest that was foregone. My father is 98 years old. We are living longer. There are now 10,000 people a day signing up for Social Security and Medicare. And for people to suggest that the federal government can't run a health care program, I would also ask people to think about where seniors in this country would be if we did not have a Medicare program. And the fact is, and I don't mean to denigrate the Chicago Cubs, but if you want to worry about something, worry about the Cubs winning the pennant next year. Don't worry about the solvency of Social Security. No one has taken money out. That is categorically not correct. My colleague mentioned a mattress. The fact is, Social Security continues to take more money in through our payroll taxes than is being paid out. We're pretty much at the tipping point now. And the question is, do we put that extra money under the mattress, or do we invest it to earn interest to put more money into Social Security? The government, constitutionally, because the Supreme Court for almost a century has not suggested Social Security, or since the 60s Medicare is unconstitutional, is now earning additional money for that fund by buying U.S. government bonds. People suggest you'll never pay them back. We've been a nation now for over 220 years and have never defaulted on a government bond, and they will be paid back to the Social Security Administration. Fraud was mentioned. We're a country of 330 million people. Is someone going to try to commit a fraud, God forbid, on Social Security? Absolutely. On Medicare? Absolutely. On disability? Absolutely. And what we're doing, because federal employees can't do anything right, is let's keep cutting monies to the administration of Social Security. We now have less people working in Social Security and less people to investigate those frauds and abuse of that very system. But your original question is, how do we solve the problem? Because it is unsustainable because of the demographics of the United States of America. There's three basic options. One is to slow the growth of future benefits by adjusting the COLA. I have not taken a position yes or no. The second is, let's raise the age limit. For someone like me, who has had essentially inside work all of their life, that may not be a problem. I may not be working shift work at U.S. Steel for 30 or 40 years. I may not be pouring concrete at I-65 in January. I may not be that waitress at the Hessville restaurant, standing on her feet 8 hours a day, her whole life waiting on tables. But I haven't said yes or no, we should keep an open mind. The third is for the employee, not the employer, to remove the payroll tax. The overwhelming number of people I have the privilege to represent in the 1st Congressional District pay Social Security tax until December 31st. I pay, as a member of Congress, full Social Security tax. But at some point, I do not pay after a certain date, and certainly not till December 31st. What is good enough for that average constituent in Northwest Indiana is good enough for every American. And we would add 21 years of solvency to the system by doing nothing else. But I haven't said that's the only way to go, Because the problem we have in Washington now is everybody signs pledges that I won't do this or I will only do that. We have to talk to each other. And maybe it's some combination of those three approaches. But it is also solvent actuarially until 2033, and Medicare is solvent until 2030. And so the average American citizen has to understand that this system is not in imminent collapse. But I also believe that the leadership in my party in particular needs to put this issue on the table to deal with it as soon as possible so we can enjoy, if you would, the joys of compounding. Why wait to the end?
It's a 2-year term. We're sitting here 2 years from today. What would you most want to be able to say that you accomplished for the citizens of the district? Pete, you want to start?
To do my very best representing our interest in Washington for steel and manufacturing, to be responsible for my committee work, but very specifically 2 years from now, to be able to say that we have successfully achieved funding for the expansion of the South Shore Railroad so we can invest in the next generation, and that we have actively begun the next example of recapturing the lakeshore as has been done by the city of Whiting and Portage, and that now we have more economic activity at the Gary Airport because there has been a final resolution during the next 2 years of the disputes between the three railroads, and there has been a final resolution of the environmental issue that continues to hang over the airport's development. So discreetly, those would be the three things I would look for in Northwest Indiana.
Mark?
Well, first of all, I would have to say strong border security to protect all our citizens of the United States. That would be number one. And to be on the record, strongly against the South Shore expansion, because I believe all the dollars spent, the amount of prospective new riders based on the Hammond Times' own statistics, you would be able to buy each new rider a brand new car every 4 years for the next 20 years using that money. And it's a waste of money. I think that's something that should be on the referendum for the entire county. Because if that's something the entire county people, taxpayers are going to have to pay for, I believe that that should be something that should be a referendum issue, not something that's going to benefit a small handful of people that are using it to subsidize Chicago job transportation. I think that we should definitely expand our coal industry here in Indiana, create good paying jobs, and keep the people here working here in Indiana instead of going to Illinois and Chicago.
Okay, Donna?
Well, in 2 years, I would hope that I could have passed a vet med card to allow our veterans to go to the doctor when they want to and where they want to. Another thing, I am against the South Shore expansion. As a railroader, people ask me, oh, you're for it, you're for it. I said, no, I'm not. As a railroader, you would think I would be for it because it's more railroad workers, more money going into railroad retirement. Yay, it helps me. But I think it's bad for the region. And that is one of the things that's the way I work. If it doesn't matter if it's good for me on a personal level. If it's bad for the region and it's bad for Northwest Indiana, then it's bad. And if we look at government programs in the past, they're notoriously over budget. You can almost double the amount of money that they're saying now that it's going to go. As a Hammond resident, why would I want to take and move a station south of my city? It's not gonna benefit Hammond. You know, everyone's talking about all this economic development that's going to come into St. John and Lowell as the track moves south. But have you looked at the stations in Hammond, East Chicago, and Gary? Where's their economic development? It's not there. And I don't believe that when we build these new stations that somebody's going to wave a magic wand and we're going to have more economic development, more shopping centers, whatever the case may be. And why do we want to build? I mean, I understand the need for transit. I just don't think that this is the way to go. And And also, with the steel industry, I would hope that we could stop this illegal steel dumping in this country. I propose that one of the ways we do this, we know what's on these ships weeks before they get here. Why don't we turn these ships away? Why do we allow them to dock and unload this steel? I think the Longshoremen's Union and the United Steelworkers Union should work in concert with each other, should work hand in hand, and say, no, this is illegal steel, this is illegal steel dumping, we are not going to unload these ships. We only have to do that 1 or 2 times to get our message across that we as Americans will not allow this. When the going gets tough, we get going. And we roll up our sleeves and we go to work, and that's what I intend to do.
Okay. Let's ask the basic question, what sets you apart from your opponent? Donna.
Well, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I always have been and I always will be. I'm willing to make the hard choices. Like I said with the South Shore, it would benefit me personally, but it's not, I don't believe it's good for the region. So therefore it's not good. So that, I'm willing to make those choices and put my personal wants aside for what's best for the region and what's best for our country. I'm willing to work with both parties. I was a Marine. I work in the rail industry, and believe it or not, they're still both good old boy networks. And I know how to work with that mindset and with those kinds of people, and I know how to build those bridges. I've been very blessed with some awesome leaders and some great mentors, and who have taught me how to build those bridges. And how to work with people to get them to do the things that you need them to do, even if they don't want to do it. You like Pete says, you work together and you build those coalitions, and that's important. Some people may not realize that, but that is very important. And I'm willing to go across those lines. I'm not beholden to any party. I'm not going to toe the party line. I'm going to toe the line for Northwest Indiana. The biggest assets that we have in this country are the individuals, are the people. And our country has been built on small businesses, on the backbone of the mom and pop stores. And if we allow those people to thrive, we cut the regulations and let those people thrive, we cut our taxes, we reduce our tax levels back to 1998 levels, we will see prosperity in this country we have not seen since World War II. And I, unlike some politicians, I want to get rid of laws. When you hear on the news that, oh, it's been a slow day because Congress isn't in session, I'm happy, because they're not passing laws taking away more of our rights or taking away more of our money. That makes me happy. We need to look at old laws on the books and get rid of them. President Carter created the EPA in the 1970s to get us off of foreign oil, to increase our domestic oil or our domestic fuel production in this country. I'm sorry, not the EPA, the Department of Energy. So what has that accomplished anything? No, we're still dependent on foreign oil. We still don't. So those are the kind of programs that we need to cut. Those are where we can save our millions of dollars and bring that money back to the people in Northwest Indiana.
Okay, Pete?
Doug, I'd only speak for myself. At the national level, I would use steel as an example. I am vice chair of the Congressional Steel Caucus, fight on behalf of the domestic steel industry constantly, and during the past summer have appeared before the International Trade Commission on more than one occasion. We have had 3 favorable rulings from the ITC during the current quarter. Much more needs to be done. I wouldn't suggest otherwise. At the local and state level, I do think that I have a record of bringing people together across party lines, across jurisdictional lines, across labor management lines, across racial lines, because we are a community of interest. I tell people we share that common lakeshore, that commonality of interest in transportation such as it exists. We have 19 disparate communities in Lake County, and we have others in LaPorte and Porter County. They have their unique characteristics, but we need to blend their strengths as one. And again, do think that whether it's the 6 years it took us working again at multiple levels in Whiting, 7 years in Portage, or again trying to bring people together on the South Shore expansion, that I do believe is going to lead to great new economic vibrancy for the children yet to come in Northwest Indiana. I live in Maryville. My message to the Maryville Town Board is, God forbid, somebody goes to work in Munster and pays that tax and can buy an affordable house and raise their family. We're all better off for that. And I would like to think over my body of work, I have exemplified that ability to do my best to bring people together.
Okay, Mark?
Well, I think there's three things that differ, but I would say first of all that federal government and our U.S. representatives that go to Washington, I feel that their job is at the federal level and should be focused at the federal level with all the federal problems that we have that filter down to our state, to our district. That's our number one job. If I wanted to worry about the South Shore, I would become a county commissioner. If I wanted to worry about the state issues, I'd be a state representative or a state senator. But my job is a U.S. House of Representative in the federal government, and the issues of national security, job creation, of making it business friendly, border security, and a multiple of that is very important. But when it comes to steel, there's people that talk about being for steel and a steel worker. I am and was the steel worker from 1979 to 1986. And there's one thing I believe all steel workers should know. Everybody can agree that NAFTA in 1992 was a terrible trade agreement that hurt our economy and our country. But everybody forgets and doesn't want to talk about the Uruguay trade agreement, well, we call it GATT, the General Agreements of Tariffs and Trades. The GATT agreement, voted in the House of Representatives November 29, 1994, was 100 times worse than NAFTA. And our congressman voted for that, which helped establish the World Trade Organization that has hurt not only the steel industry, all major manufacturing. And we tend to forget history, we forget the facts, and a lot of those young steel workers do not know the true voting history that worked against the steel industry. And I just want to bring that to the attention to everyone here and everyone watching, that trade agreement November 29, 1994 has hurt our country, has hurt the steel industry, and established the World Trade Organization that has hurt everybody and our U.S. sovereignty in trade.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have with Republican Mark Leyva, Democrat Pete Visclosky, Libertarian Donna Dunn, candidates for U.S. House of Representatives in the 1st District in Indiana. Thank you for viewing.